I need for my fellow brothers and sisters, my American brothers and sisters, this is our country. If we don't band together and try to make a difference here, no one else can. Because we get the government, we get the system, we get the results that we deserve. And that happens when we participate.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Heather and Steve. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's really hard to talk about. It's really one of a parent's worst fears. Over the summer, I had come across an article in the newspaper about this really famous center for autism that's located in the state of New York. And I was shocked by the headline because it said that one of the employees had abused one of the people that lived there, a young man. And the abuse was aggressive, and it wasn't anything that you could say maybe wasn't abuse. But the thing that made this story stand out was somebody, a brave somebody, took a video of it on their phone and alerted the parents. And you think about all the times that things like that could happen in a group home or a residential facility, and nobody's brave enough to do that, or there's no cameras around to catch that kind of thing. And even though that moment had to be the hardest moment in the whole world for that family to hear that kind of news, it also showed me the power of that video footage, because that was the difference. Our children are not credible witnesses when it comes to court cases and when it comes to the Justice Center. So if we don't have that camera footage, a lot of times the people who are perpetrating these crimes and doing these things just keep doing them. There's no one catching them. There's no proof they did it. And at the most, maybe they get transferred to a different location to do it to different people. Or they quit and then they get a similar job and do the same thing somewhere else. So today, instead of just concentrating on that horrific moment, we'll touch on it and we'll dig in a little bit. I want our audience to feel a sense of peace and reassurance that this family took that tragedy and turned it into an opportunity. And they're making sure that other families won't have the same nightmare play out for them. They're developing a type of AI software, application that is better than a surveillance camera. And I won't do it justice. So I'm going to introduce our guest, Anil. He is the founder of Guardian Watch, and he's the father of the son who was abused at the Anderson Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Anil.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Steve.
Recently, you were on Fox News describing this platform, and the footage is great. So we will make sure the audience gets the link to that so they can watch it. Let's talk about how you got from that moment where you had that phone call to now. Just like a quick recap so the audience has an idea, because a lot of people, if they had faced something like that, a few months later wouldn't be in the position you're in, but you're different. And I want to highlight that.
So on August 11th of 2024, we were going upstate to see my son at the Anderson Center for Autism, where he had been residing for almost 3 years, attending school and living on campus. As you said earlier, Anderson is renowned to be one of the best residential school programs in the country. And we did thorough research before we placed him there. And even though there were some prior incidents that were highlighted as to being troubling, we inquired about them, we did our due diligence, and we were assured that these past troubles were no longer there, and they had put in protocols and procedures in place to make sure something like that never happened again. On August 11th, my son's mother received a cryptic phone call, then a text message, and then a video taken by a brave whistleblower who informed us that since he had been there for close to a year, he had witnessed repeated abuse at that residence of all the residents who were living in that particular home, and that even though he had complained to the house resident manager, even though he had complained to other folks, to other staff members, basically he was told that keep your mouth shut, and what happens in this house stays in this house. Those were his words and quotes. When we saw that video, I had that day marked off in my mind and in my calendar and in my heart as the day of horror. When I saw the video, it blew my world apart. I could not believe that one human being could do something like that to another human being, especially a vulnerable person, someone who needs other people to take care of them, to look after them, someone who is vulnerable and by definition, as you stated earlier, someone who is of such a state that their testimony would not be admissible in a court of law, and also someone who wouldn't complain, because a lot of these kids who are subjected to such abuse, for them, they think that this is just what their life is. They think that this is what's normal for them. So they will get accustomed to it and they'll suffer through it and they won't complain to anybody because this is the caregiver, right? Who takes care of them day in and day out. And if this person is doing it to them, then it must be, the right thing. This particular individual was caught on camera in I believe, a 20-second clip. He had grabbed my son by his genitalia and dragged him across the living room floor of the residence. This was done in the afternoon. This was done in front of other staff members. This was done in front of other residents in that home. So, just from that fact that this particular individual had been doing this constantly, he was very comfortable doing it in front of everybody out in the open, and nobody from the house manager to the management team of Anderson Center for Autism cared or thought that this was something that they needed to stop. Because quite frankly, in my opinion, at the end of the day, they don't want to disrupt their revenue stream. They don't want to disrupt their lifestyle. They don't want to disrupt their jobs by doing the right thing or the ethical thing. So we immediately pulled him out on that day, drove straight up to Dutchess County, where Anderson is located, pulled him out of the residence, brought him back, and initiated a report with the New York State troopers who investigated. And in terms of justice, I don't believe that justice has been served, even though the perpetrator has pled guilty to a Class E felony. We were initially told he might get probation, meaning no jail time. Then we were told that he might get 6 months of jail time. And then once we started to enlist the help of media outlets such as Fox 5 News here in New York City, the horror and the outrage started spreading. So luckily, that caused the prosecutors and the justice system in Dutchess to say, okay, maybe we need to be a little more serious and try to get, a longer sentence. So now we've heard that he will most likely be sentenced to a sentence of 1 to 3 years, which means he could be out. Now, one thing that I want to highlight is that there were 6 to 7 other residents in that home. B, this particular individual had been working there for over 3 years. So, folks, you can do the math. Multiply 7 people, 365 days a year for 3 years, and then take that number and slash it in half. The amount of abuse that he probably inflicted on that home is a crime against humanity. Out of that horror, my son is still suffering to this day from PTSD. He is still, just yesterday, we have 2 behavioral therapists who have to work with him constantly. And just yesterday, he started crying out, saying like, no, 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 saying the name of the perpetrator, Garnet, 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 bad boy, police, hurts, it hurts. And then he started pointing towards their groins and saying, hit. These are things he never said before. These are things he had never, but for what Anderson did to him and what Garnet Collins did to him, these are things that never, ever came out of his mouth before. We don't know how long it'll take to get him over this trauma. PTSD is one of the most difficult things to get therapy for, because usually it's done through talk therapy. And by definition, again, our kids don't have the cognitive ability to work through in a talk format their trauma. So, we are at a loss. We have no path forward that gives us an objective way to try to help him and to address, what he has gone through. From this experience, I would say for the first 2 months, I was beyond depressed, at times suicidal. And, but then made a decision that if for anybody else, I have to live for him. I have to make sure that he is taken care of. I have to make sure that something like this will never happen to him again. And then I had a second calling. I have enough, I have the ability, I have the mind, and luckily I have the means to safeguard his future. And I will be the most zealous advocate for him going forward. But then I said to myself, I am the exception. I'm not the rule. There's so many families, there's so many kids out there in the system who are being abused, who are being raped, who are being sexually assaulted, who have been given black eyes, broken bones, broken collarbones, who have no other choice but to continue. And they are continuing to face this type of trauma because we have in my opinion, a criminal ecosystem in the special needs community here in New York State and across the country. And I said criminal because they are perpetrating abuse, violence, crimes against this vulnerable population, and they're getting paid to do it. Our federal tax dollars, our state tax dollars go to these institutions and support the infliction of these crimes against our vulnerable loved ones. And it's a criminal ecosystem because there's been no incentive, there's no mandate, there's no desire, it seems, amongst the politicians, amongst the people who are running these companies, these nonprofits, to change or to institute procedures or protocols to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. My son could still have been at Anderson today. The only reason, and this was said to us by the state troopers who investigated, the only reason that Garnet Collins was arrested, the only reason that Anderson admitted, oh my God, something did happen improper and bad, was because there was a video. The troopers told us that they're tired of going to these facilities, conducting investigations, and then having it go nowhere. Why? Because there's no video evidence to prove the harm that was caused to these individuals. So in October of last year, I said to myself, well, I wish someone else had been there to protect my son, but that wasn't the case. So maybe I'd have to be there to help protect other people's children, daughters and sons and daughters who are out there in the system. And my conclusion was that we need to create a grassroots campaign. We need to enlist the public to make them outraged at what has happened. We need to change our system so that cameras were installed in these facilities. We need to have a system that can objectively be a guardian for these vulnerable people so that if something happens to them, it's detected, it's reported, and the evidence is preserved so that we can prosecute these criminals and these institutions for the harm that they're causing our loved ones. So with that goal in mind and that mission, I started a company called Guardian Watch AI. And in essence, the mission of Guardian Watch is to create an AI-driven computer vision system that will recognize baseline behaviors, will detect when an anomaly occurs, it will create a real-time incident report, and preserve the evidence for future law enforcement or other actions to be taken against these individuals.
I'm so glad that you took that horrible event and instead of just pulling your child out and hiding them from the world, you're thinking in a different mindset. How do we make the world safer? Because when people know there's eyes on them, they do act differently. I worked in a nursing home. We had hundreds of cameras. We knew they were there. And at times when there was an incident occurring, you could see staff pointing at the camera and saying, look at the person in the corner. Like they're giving people guidance. Like, do you see what's happening? Like they were starting to use it almost like a two-way system. But the thing that stood out to me when you were talking is we had hundreds of cameras and we did have a team of security guards at the hospital, but they can't watch hundreds of screens at the same time. Having software that could identify when something was going wrong and alert people in real time so that you can send the extra staff, so you can send what that person needs. So there's eyes on the situation. Not only does that protect the staff in some ways because they know that,
Right.
Help is on the way. It helps our children, our loved ones that are very vulnerable. And anyone who tells you that cameras are an invasion of privacy and that's why they're not allowed in group homes, tell them to stop. I mean, it's like the most tired, sorry excuse because cameras are everywhere. They're on the bus, they're at the mall, they're in my doctor's office, they're at the hospital. Everywhere we go, every street corner we're on, there are cameras pointed at us. And if our children had a phone in their hand that they could operate in that way, they could record things too, right? But it's almost like this population is so incredibly vulnerable. They're not using technology the same way as all of us are, at least some of them, right? And if you're living in a residential facility, I feel like it's important to make that distinction for our audience, especially if you're living in one before the age of 21. That's a hard placement to get. That means your level of need is profound. So
Absolutely.
we have people with profound needs living in these circumstances that the court has deemed not credible. It is actually criminal not to have these safeguards in place. So as you're developing this platform, I would think that parents could help. And I remember you bringing up the idea of AI learns from data and video and things that you're inputting, so that it learns things and it starts to understand what an anomaly is. Oh, and that looks like aggression, or that could be stimming, and it starts to sort things out and be able to understand things better. How can people who are listening right now think, I want to help Anil. I want to make Guardian Watch AI better, to work efficiently. What could they do?
That's a great that's a great sentiment. We want to enlist parents. We want to enlist stakeholders in this ecosystem and to transform it from a criminal ecosystem to a virtuous ecosystem. And part of that process is, as you stated, we need to train our AI platform using, as much as possible, real world videos. Now, thankfully, there isn't a repository out there of needs kids or vulnerable people being abused on camera and then being sold as a commercial database. Thank goodness, at least we haven't gone to that point yet. So how do we then solve this problem? And you're correct that when you said that artificial intelligence, be it text-based or video-based or audio-based, it learns based upon data that is inputted into it. And the analogy I draw is, we are basically all biological machines. When we are born, our brain is a tabula rasa. It's a blank slate, right? And our brain is basically our own personal algorithm. So how does our personal algorithm learn over time? Well, we start getting input, right, from when we're a baby, be it sight, sound, hearing, touch, smell. And then as we go older and older, those inputs get more and more. And so our brains over time learn to take in this information and train our internal algorithms to guide us through our lives, through experiences, so that when we touch a hot stove for the first time, we say, ouch, we know next time not to do that. Well, guess what? Computer-based AI is exactly the same way. The more data, the more examples, the more instances of interaction that you can feed into it, the more accurate, the more intelligent it'll become, the less false positives we'll be identifying in the future. And also, most importantly, which I think will be the killer app for this platform, is the goal is to be able to detect anomalies. But I think the real killer app and what we're building on a foundational level is the ability of the AI to provide clinical insights in the future. What do I mean by clinical insights? For example, if a particular individual is going through some type of sensory event, and they're exhibiting certain behaviors, or they're responding to some type of tangible danger that nobody else knows, but they see it, or they're exhibiting some type of escape, behavior, attention seeking, or maybe there's a medical problem going on with them. The AI can be trained over time using what's called multimodal inputs. Multimodal just means different types of inputs: sight, sound, the ability to do pose detection, how someone's body is angled, what their face is exhibiting, emotive issues or indications on their face. All of these things can help feed the AI information and data that will allow the AI to say, oh, I see, Stephanie, who is, 15 years old, and she's now doing the following behaviors. In the past, when these behaviors manifested, she then had a meltdown of this type. So the AI could say, staff, please go and attend to Stephanie. She may be on the path to a meltdown or some type of a self-injurious behavior. Be forewarned, but go and just, check in on her. This type of insight could also be used to train future therapists, future people who are dealing with such individuals on a day-to-day basis. It could help BCBAs, it could help behavioral analysts, it could help a whole range of people, to basically educate them, because after all, autism is a spectrum, and each individual is unique, right? They exhibit their autism in their own unique way. Well, AI is the exact type of tool that can identify individuals, identify their particular ways of manifesting, and hopefully provide these types of clinical insights in the future. Now, to
That
answer your
has,
question,
yeah,
your question as to how they can people can help us, if you go to guardianwatch.ai, we have built a platform whereby parents, caretakers, therapists can upload videos that they've taken over the life of their children or over the life of their interactions with such individuals. Parents, for example, I'm not expecting any abuse videos, but I would love for parents to upload videos showing their kids stimming, doing hand flapping, jumping up and down, doing echolalia, doing voice types of movements, anything that can help the AI understand that when a person is on the spectrum, they may do these types of behaviors. They're not violence, it's not abuse, but these are behaviors that the AI could then recognize and establish what we call the baseline. And once we have the baseline established and we feed more data to the baseline, the clinical insights starts becoming more meaningful and more accurate. Now, to address how we are trying to detect abuse and violence, this is also a very creative solution that I believe we came up with, which is we're asking therapists, we're asking parents, we're asking other people in this ecosystem to basically stage examples of interaction that may be deemed violent. We're not asking anybody to hit anybody. We're not asking anybody to inflict actual pain. But what we are asking for, and what we've received are, you'll have a video scene where two people are interacting, and one person, will show that they're striking the other person, obviously not hitting them in reality, but just going through the motion, or grabbing an iPad away from one person, then maybe hitting that person with the iPad again, showing the motions of it. All of these actions, all of these interactions will help train the AI, to identify, oh, an anomaly has occurred, right? Because the way the AI will first think is, if it sees somebody doing stimming, hand motions, maybe yelling, screaming, jumping, it'll say anomaly detected. Then the next analysis is, well, what type of anomaly is this? Is this a stimming anomaly? Is this a self-injurious anomaly? Or is this an anomaly where a third party is hurting the other party? Right. So all of these different categories we need to train the AI on so that it can differentiate and then identify what's happening there and alert appropriate staff to go and to intervene or preserve that evidence for future use.
I love all of this. When I was training to be a crisis, to work in crisis situations, they had us wear a heart monitor, and then they would send us into situations and we were videoed. It was nerve-wracking knowing we were being videoed, but that was the best training I've ever had. I could look at my heart rate on the screen. I could hear my voice. So even when I was getting accelerated and my heart was beating, I was learning to talk in a calm voice, where my hand should be so that I'm not triggering the person. Because when you go into fight or flight yourself, when you are a caregiver or you're a staff member, you are scared or you're angry, most likely. Anxious, angry, scared, right? Those are the feelings when somebody's having a meltdown, when you're afraid you could get hurt. So those systems can detect those feelings in the staff as well. And that can be a training module too. Now, see, when you got escalated and you got tense and your voice got louder, the situation escalated. When you sat down on the couch and used a calm voice, the person didn't have a meltdown. And sometimes just seeing it in black and white, right? Like you just see it and you go, oh, okay, next time I'm in that situation, I'm definitely not going to yell. I'm definitely not going to put my hands on them because that makes it worse.
Right. You are 100% right. Because I see it also with my interaction with my son. There are days as we're human that we are frustrated. Something happens or we don't have the patience or the time. And my son 100% feeds off the energy that I put out there. He can read my face. If he sees that I am troubled or I'm annoyed, he'll ask me, "What happened? What happened?" And then he'll think that it's because of him. And he'll say, "Are you happy? Are you happy? I don't want to be a bad boy." And right away it tells me, holy crap, I better, pull it together here because everything that I'm projecting, not even towards him, but everything that I may be projecting, he's picking up on, and that's going to potentially cause him to go in the wrong direction. So you're 100% right. This tool, these training modules that we can create using this platform will allow people to take better care of our loved ones.
And it offers a level of protection for the staff member. I want us to just think about it from their perspective for just a moment. And I know this could be a difficult exercise given the staff that had worked with your son, but there are really good people doing these jobs. They're not all bad apples, right? So if you really put yourself in that position and you think, oftentimes our caregivers are not paid a lot. They have very little control of their schedule. They're often mandated, which means they're staying shift after shift. Sometimes during the holiday season, I have DSP friends, direct support professionals, that worked 3 or 4 days straight in a row. This camera also records that. How often do the staff get to leave? When are they getting breaks? Are they getting to eat? Are they getting to sleep? This documents what's happening to them just as much as it documents what's happening to our loved ones. And there are instances where someone gets hurt and it is not the staff's fault. They followed the protocol. They did what they were supposed to do. Maybe there was another resident or somebody else that entered the equation and made it go the wrong way. But the staff should feel confident in knowing that this technology will not only identify something and write up a quick note, which also makes their life a whole lot easier when you're talking about documentation, if there's this software doing it for you. But it can also clear you just as easy as it could incriminate you, right? And when you know a camera's 100%. On you, you're going to be on your best behavior. You're not going to do something crazy knowing that that's documented and it's going to be used in court.
100%. The deterrence effect just for that reason is massive. So think about it. I think just having a camera in the community areas will probably decrease the rate of abuse by 50%. Now, the other 50% may still exist, but going back to your earlier point, there are a lot of good people who are working in this industry. There are a lot of good people who have a calling, and you need a calling because you said it earlier, your first reaction if when an aggressive situation arises is fight or flight. And if you can't run away, then you're going to take a fight stance, a defensive stance. That's our natural human reaction. So you need persons who have a specific level of empathy and a calling and a desire to work in this field. And that goes hand in hand on the issue of how are these folks compensated, right? If you're getting the same salary or the same wages as working at a fast food restaurant, but at the fast food restaurant you have definable hours, right? You know that you're not necessarily going to be in any type of physical or other type of interactions. Then the folks who can't make it into the fast food industry, right? They will then gravitate towards these types of jobs because the bar may be lower, right? So we're attracting the wrong folks, the ones who don't have the calling, and the ones who shouldn't be working in this space just because of the level of pay that we have that the industry pays them. And then when this small portion of these people do this, they do it in such an egregious and a horrific way that it paints everybody in that system with the same brush. Case in point, one of the gentlemen who's working with my son now, I am shocked at the level of his empathy, his patience. In fact, just this morning, I said this to him. I said, "Where did you learn this from? Who taught you this?" And I said, "Was it your mom, your grandmother? Was it your father? Where did this come from? Because I have not seen this level of emotional maturity and empathy in many people. Be it whatever industry that I have worked in the past." And he said it was his mom who gave him those principles and those ethics and that sense of compassion. He said the word. He said compassion. He said that's the his guiding light when he works in this industry and he deals with these people. So definitely compensation is a big factor, but also weeding out the people who shouldn't be in this industry, shouldn't be in this space, is a very big factor also.
When you talk about quality assurance and those like safeguards that are supposed to be in place for our loved ones, Steve and I were talking about this with the Justice Center. For the audience, if you're not familiar, if something happens and you're in that, if you have an intellectual or developmental disability and you're receiving services through that system and something occurs, there's a special center, the Justice Center, and they are the ones that are supposed to take care of the special investigation, and they have that lens, right? They're supposed to appreciate those unique situations. In fairness to them, they probably get almost 100,000 claims of abuse and neglect that they have to sort through every year. Their staff is not that big, right? So in the end of the day, if half of the cases have a intervention that follows it, we're doing okay. But we know that if it gets all the way to the Justice Center, something went wrong. And we feel like they dropped the ball. But what does the Justice Center say? Man, if we had video footage and we could really look at this situation, we could make better recommendations. The Justice Center endorses the use of cameras. So we had to find a way to get legislators to back that because we're stuck right now. And the other thing that we've all discussed offline that I think is worth mentioning to people, and you kind of hinted at this in the beginning, Medicaid dollars pay for these placements. Now, if I lived in long-term care and I was abused while I was in long-term care, lots of things are going to happen. Number one, the health department gets involved and they investigate. The facility has to come up with a corrective action plan. They have to. And then the Department of Health is going to keep coming back and make sure that you're doing the plan and it's working. And you could get a fine. And you also have a 5-star rating when you're in long-term care, a nursing home. And that's adjusted. If you have deficiencies, your rating goes down. And guess what, guys? If your rating goes down, you don't get paid as much. So what does that do? Inherently, that makes facilities respond quickly and effectively and efficiently when abuse or neglect is suspected, because they don't want their star rating to go down, because that means they won't be reimbursed at the same rate anymore. We have nothing like that when it comes to the IDD population. Nothing that even comes close to that. This would offer that possibility where we could really start to cultivate a new kind of environment, a new way of looking at it. Because let me tell you, my Medicaid dollars should not be paying the salary of someone who abused my child. And I do not think New York wants to give money back, right? So just so you guys have an idea, billing is a huge part of all of these facilities, right? I mean, they have entire teams of people that know what the billing codes are, know how to get them through insurance and Medicaid. If they want to process these claims and investigate these things and they find out abuse happened during one of those shifts, they can't bill Medicaid for abuse. Medicaid shouldn't be paying for that. They pay for treatment. They pay for care. They pay for support. They shouldn't be paying an abuser's salary. So think about the implication. New York would have to give the money back. If the abuse was substantiated, they would, right?
Right. Well, the epidemic of abuse is staggering. As I started researching this industry for the business, I found out, to my horror, these following stats: 80% of abuse is unreported. 80%. Disabled children are 500 times more likely to be sexually assaulted. 4 out of 5 disabled females have faced sexual violence. 4 out of 5. And again, our taxpayer money is being used to pay these abusers. Now, you mentioned earlier about the number of complaints at the Justice Center, gets reported every year. I saw a report from the Justice Center that about 90,000 cases were reported in 2024 as of November. So let's just assume 90,000 is the number for the year. If 80% of abuse is never reported, you have to multiply 90,000 times 5 to get the actual number of abuse that happens. So we're talking about 400 to 450,000 instances of abuse in New York State alone. And by the way, if I remember correctly, there's about 135,000 people who are in that system. So if you have 400,000 to 450,000 cases of abuse happening, and you have 135,000 people in the system, on average, you're seeing at least 4 to 5 abuse cases per person every year. And of course, we know that it's not happening, to everybody equally, which means that there are pockets of people where crimes against humanity, in my opinion, are being perpetrated. So this is a staggering problem. This is something that I don't understand. Why is it that our politicians, our state government, for years, there's been legislation proposed in our in the Assembly and in the New York Senate. It never gets out of committee. It seems that there's so many special interests who are focused on keeping the status quo, to keep the money flowing. And for one reason or another, I don't know why, because I don't have the proof, the politicians are going along with it. So, the problem is that we don't have enough principled, ethical people in our government. What we need is for the public to get outraged. What we need is for parents to get outraged. What we need is the voice of the people to be so thunderous and so loud, and to shame these politicians, possibly shame them into taking corrective, ethical, moral action. This is a moral issue, people. We will be judged in the future by how we treat our vulnerable population today. And right now, we're getting a failing grade.
Absolutely. Steve, when you talk to parents who've endured situations like this, why don't they step up? Why are more parents not brave like Anil? What do you think makes them hesitate or be scared to do that?
Well, it's complicated. I look at it when I met my wife in a facility. We were both working there, and we saw some of the stuff that Anil was talking about. Unfortunately, when you speak up, you're going to get retaliated against, and that doesn't mean that we didn't do it. But then you got to be able to move on because you're not going to have a job there probably too much longer. It makes it very difficult for anybody to become the whistleblower. I'm sure you found that out in your own case. It's as far as the parents part of it. Look, I'm heavily into the foster care system. It is so what you're offering is so needed in there because people think the abuse of these children is only coming in and out of the bio homes where these kids are being pulled out by CPS. That's not the case. There's legitimate cases of foster care abuse within the foster homes and legitimate cases of abuse in the foster care facilities, even locally. If somebody were to Google some things that happened in one of the agencies locally, a girl got raped. And it goes back to somebody that should never have been working there and not vetting. And it's not an isolated situation because there's people right now that want to come on our podcast. They don't want to tell their stories who have aged out of foster care, talking about the same thing that you're talking about. And they're afraid to speak up. And the good foster parents are afraid to speak up because they get retaliated against. The ones that are where issues are going on, they're the ones that need the cameras in their and this kind of technology in their homes. They're the ones that probably need it as much as a bio home where CPS decided they had to pull the kids out of there. And I see it all the time. It's a huge issue. The applications for what you're trying to do are profoundly out there. I think it's a lot bigger than people think. And, we had a camera in our house. I'll give you a quick example. We had a camera in our house. We had a teenager that was bullying one of our nonverbal autistic kids. If we hadn't had a camera in our house, we would have gotten more trouble than the kid who was doing it, the teenager who was doing it. And the only thing that protected us was the camera that was in our home. You know what happened? The agencies told us we couldn't have a camera anymore. And the reason is because they don't want any oversight. They don't want the light shining over them. And to be honest with you, it should. No. Right, and it should. And so whatever I can do to help get your product out there, I'm in because it's needed and it's for the benefit of all the children out there who are most vulnerable that can't defend themselves, they can't speak up, they can't tell us what's going on with some of this stuff.
And if it can detect your heart rate, if it can tell when you're upset, just those biometric, that biofeedback is so insanely important when we think about short-staffed facilities, a hospital, a nursing home, a group home. If there were cameras that they could say, hey, Jimmy's in room 5 and he's having a hard time, his heart rate's accelerated, check his sugar, maybe something's going on. He seems to be louder than normal. Once these systems really know your baseline, they can be so effective in alerting staff when that person needs some extra TLC, when they need a special treatment. And if we need more staff, then it alerts people. It's all connected. It's all digital. And I think I agree, Steve. I think the possibilities with this are endless. I give you so much credit, Anil, for not only thinking this through in a way that could help your son, but like making it bigger than your family. This is bigger than you, right? I mean, your son is your world. Yes. I have a statement from your son's mother, and I'm going to read it. We've gone over some of the details that she goes over, but from a mom's perspective, I want people to hear what Shalini has to say in her own words. She would have been here today, but she wasn't able to make the time that we're doing the recording today. But she is the one that reached out to me. I had posted about this and I had, a call to action. What can we do to help this family? And she reached out to me and we've been texting almost daily. I've never met her in person, but I feel like she's one of my friends, and that's what happens in our community. We have a crisis. We are in the trenches together and we make these bonds because it's like trauma bonding, right? Like we've gone through the fire together. And for all intents and purposes, I'm glad my circle has grown. I'm sorry that it's including people that were hurt, but we all have had challenges. And knowing that we don't walk alone, I hope empowers those families that don't feel brave. The ones that say, I don't want to make things worse, or I don't want to lose the placement, or I don't know how I would bring my child home. And I always say, but can you sleep at night knowing they're there? Like, can you be okay with it? Because that's a hard pill to swallow too. We have so many things that we're juggling as families. And I know there are situations where people cannot bring their child home. And I know your son was in the hospital for months after this situation, trying to recover psychologically, physically from the abuse that he endured. Just having a child in the hospital is hard. Having a child who has communication difficulties in the hospital is even harder. But someone who's gone through what your son has gone through, there's no words actually to really adequately explain what that does to a family. There's a lot of buzz right now, and I don't know when exactly this episode is going to play, but there were RFK Jr. made some statements, and he brought autism to the headline, right? And he's talking about it, and a lot of people in his position haven't talked about it before. And I'm just going to bring up one line that he said, because it's really polarizing people, but I thought we could take one quick minute. He said that autism can destroy a family. And when people heard that, they felt like he was blaming the person with autism. At least that's what the criticism is, right? He's saying, oh my gosh, having a kid like this destroyed my marriage and made me, go bankrupt. I didn't feel that from him. And I'm just wondering how that, for the two of you, how does that statement hit you? Because I understand why it's a hard word and it's a hard statement to hear. But this is a show where we talk about sometimes, those controversial topics. And if you could just, I don't know, give me a little bit of your insights on that.
The only thing that autism has destroyed is the picture of who I thought my son was going to be if he did have autism. That doesn't mean that I don't love him for who he is and how he is. That does not mean that I will abandon him or he is the cause of anything negative that's happened in my life. Absolutely not. I would give up my life today for him. If someone came to me and said, I can make him happy and safe and you'll never have to worry again, and all you have to do is end your life, I'll say, where do I sign? The fact that RFK Jr., someone in his position, is at least thinking about these things, has been thinking about these things, is questioning, that to me gives him incredible credibility. I'm not saying he's correct in anything or everything that he's said. I'm saying, thank goodness someone is initiating the conversation. Someone is willing to have a dialogue. Someone is willing to say, hey, things are not looking normal here. Something's going on with our community, with our humanity, with our kids. And the fact that the rates of autism have skyrocketed since the 70s, yes, we can attribute some of that to better reporting. Maybe it's a expansion of the criteria, but we don't go from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31 just because we are tracking with better data. I personally believe there's an environmental factor at play here, and I'm sure there's a genetic factor. We are human beings. We're evolving year after year, but the rate of change, the rate of the prevalence of this of autism in our children, this is not something that occurs naturally. So something's happening. I don't know what. I sometimes think about, and I think he mentioned this as well, and it resonated with me is, you know, in the 70s, we started using a lot of fertilizers, a lot of chemicals in our food chain, right? We've been using all in the name of driving costs down and to try to increase the yield. But nobody ever really thought, what is the collateral damage of this approach to, putting these things into our food chain? And guess what? Who's eating the output? Mothers when they're pregnant with their children. And that's going to have a direct impact, right, on the development of children in the womb. So, yes, I don't have the answers. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, but I'm glad that someone like RFK is at least asking the questions and willing to dive into and investigate what's happening. If they come up with like a curt response or a conclusion based upon non-scientific facts, then yes, I would be the first to criticize him or criticize anybody who does that. But I'm not going to criticize him or demonize him for actually caring and asking questions about what's happening in this system.
Thank you. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, the last few days, Heather and I have been taking some hits on some of this because we think exactly like you do. It's just unfortunate because none of this gets fixed at all unless we have a conversation. And if you're not even having a conversation or willing to listen, we're lost. And there's so many parents out there that have been supportive of the fact that we need oversight, we need some kind of accountability, and we need to know why. And if it winds up being something we don't think it is, okay, but at least we have a why. At least we have an answer. And I think that's important. And I just hope they're allowed to finish what they started with it, because I think there's a lot of parents out there looking for answers and the whys.
In all honesty, some of the symptoms, the side effects, the behaviors that are attached to autism are destructive. When a child bangs their head into the wall until they need life support, that's destructive. That destroys a family. When you can't leave your home because they're going to melt down in the kitchen, and then they're going to melt down at the store, and the cops are going to get involved. That destroys your sense of peace. That destroys your future in some ways, because everything's going to revolve around this really difficult thing. If a child is blind and a doctor says they can give them sight, I can't imagine a parent who wouldn't want that. Someone who can't hear and you give them back their hearing. Most people are going to embrace that. And I'm not saying that there's a cure for autism, but I'm saying I agree. Something's going on that's making the incident rate go up. But if we just back it up one more step and we say, guys, if you look back at all these advocacy websites and pages for years, all we've done is said, will somebody see us? Will somebody pay attention to us? Will somebody make us a priority? Will somebody at least say that we exist? Because we fight for scraps every budget season. And this man stood up in front of everybody and saw us. He said that he felt bad that we were in this situation. What he does with that, you're right. I'm going to hold judgment. I'm going to give him a little grace and see where he goes with this. But I'm not mad that he brought it up. We should all want our leaders to bring this up. We should all want to be seen and heard. And I hope that he gives us a seat at his table. I feel like a lot of times leadership is so removed from us that we don't get to have those conversations with them. They don't have their boots on the ground the same way. They're not rooted in it. He doesn't live it. So does he word it the way we would? No way. He is not living and breathing this the way we are. He's saying it as an outsider who cares, and let's hold him to it. He told us what he wants to do. Let's hold him to it and let's leverage that. His energy and his dedication to figuring this out. Let's not blast him for it. Let's hold him to it, right? Like, he announced it. He made a big deal out of it. So that's my feeling on it. I think as we come to an end, I'll read the statement from your son's mother and make sure that people hear from her with her perspective. And is there anything else before I do that you want to make sure that the audience knows about Guardian Watch AI or your story?
I want to say this. I implore the parents, I implore the DSPs, I implore every person who is in this ecosystem to lend their voice so that we can change it for the better. We need people to step up. We need people to express their outrage. We need people to call your politicians. If you're in New York State, call Albany. I tried so hard the first 2 months after we brought my son home. I got no help, no response. Shameless, both from our state politicians, and I'm talking at the executive branch, I'm talking at the legislative branch. I tried to contact my local federal rep, no help. I contacted our two state senators, federal, no help. Why? Why? I don't know. So I need for my fellow brothers and sisters, my American brothers and sisters, this is our country. If we don't band together and try to make a difference here, no one else can. Because we get the government, we get the system, we get the results that we deserve. And that happens when we participate.
Very well said. Okay, I'm going to try to do her statement justice. It is a little emotional. I'll just give the audience a little bit of a warning. Her words. First, I want to say that it's been an honor being a mother to my son. I was given the privilege of bringing him into this world 20 years ago. As parents, our biggest and most important role is to protect our children. The system failed my son. To get a call from a strange number and shortly thereafter receive a video of my son's physical and sexual abuse has been by far the most devastating thing I've ever experienced. My son screaming in pain, howling in agony, saying he wants to call his mommy. It echoes in my head all the time. I screamed, I wailed, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to die in that moment, and a part of me did die that day. I got on my knees and I begged the universe for mercy. Despite all of this, we're lucky, in a way. A selfless whistleblower staff member could no longer tolerate the abuse he was witnessing and felt compelled to alert us. We will forever be grateful to him. This man took matters into his own hands, and if not for his courage, my son would still be a victim. There are many thousands of parents of special needs children that have suspicions of abuse, but do not have the hard evidence to prove it due to lack of video surveillance in our institutions and facilities. They are looking for justice and hoping that our cause will bring light to this matter on a national and global level. My ex-husband and I are on a mission to remedy this. We've gifted tech partners. Anil has developed Guardian Watch AI. This artificial intelligence monitoring system has the ability to detect abuse in real time, which is to say, as it is happening, it is a proactive approach to both discourage abuse and mitigate the abuse that does occur by allowing intervention before escalation. It ensures and holds people in charge accountable and will help ensure companies too. Every life is precious. As a society, it is our duty to protect and serve our special needs community. All children deserve to grow up in an environment absent of abuse. I am not sure what I could possibly say after reading her statement because she said so many important things, and I want our audience to really reflect on how it would feel if you got that phone call. if you got the text message with a video that showed somebody doing something like that to someone you loved. And I'm so happy that all of our paths have crossed and that we can work on this together, because there's a lot of things that you can spend your time doing in life, but this is something important. And I think the applications of this are going to be very far-reaching. And I hope it gives people peace of mind. And I hope the people who have had trauma and have had to go through situations like this know that we see you and that we care. And that's why we've brought Anil on today, so he could share this, share his story, and give everybody just a little bit of hope. Thank you for coming today, and I hope that you will follow up with us as this develops. We'll put a link in the podcast description to make sure people know how to get in touch with you, how to upload videos if they want to be part of training the AI platform. And until next time.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.